Okay guys, it's time for us to talk again. Today, we're going to talk about some of the things that we encounter in van life. In fact, today is going to be a video you're not going to want to miss. So buckle up. This is all about the perceptions of van life. How many times have you heard someone automatically assume something about van life simply because you pull up in a van or you see somebody else who does? Well, today, this is what this entire video is about. What people think. In fact, no matter how you look at it, somebody's gonna say something. And so, kind of preparing for the worst and expecting the best, that's the best way to do it. So let's tackle all the difficult subjects of the things that people perceive about those who live in their tiny spaces and travel. Yeah, it's time. Let's talk about it. I don't know how many times I've been telling somebody that I do van life and they've said, down by the river? The fact is, one Saturday Night Live skit turned the van community on its side. It's kind of funny because it's like this ongoing joke at this point, but the perception to some people really is, you must live in a van down by the river. It's a silly one, but it's a perception. And I think the funniest part of that one is, yeah, I have stayed down by a river and it's been lovely. But I also stay in the mountains, I stay in the desert, I stay by lakes. You know, why limit us to just down by the river? I don't want to just be down by the river. I want to be able to go anywhere, which is why I'm in the van. Next up on our list is white van syndrome. Yep, I said it. White van syndrome. It's a real thing. How many times have you heard someone automatically assume, oh no, there's a white van. Something bad must be going on. Or you've seen a Facebook post where somebody has said they were in a white van. And in your little heart of hearts, you've just cringed, especially knowing that you drive a white van. The fact of the matter is, vans like this have been a popular thing to go after for quite some time. Now, I've looked at the statistics, and there are a lot of incidents that happen across this great and wonderful United States that we live in that have lots of bad things going on. And amongst those, the tiniest of tiny, barely even visible perceptions have happened in service vans. There was one particular case that whenever I was younger actually happened a bit before like all of this really blew up. And because of that one case, the stigma has stayed with us. That white vans are the boogeyman. Always be scared, always be vigilant. And don't even get me started on if those service vans actually have like a locking mechanism for safety. In fact, one of the things that I was going to do whenever I got my van was I was going to go and put a few additional safety devices on it. And one of my friends specifically said, oh, make sure you get one of those circle locks to put on your back doors. And around the time that he said that, I started seeing all these people posting all these nasty things about, oh my gosh, I think this person was abducted and the van had those locks that they're locking people inside with. And I just kind of laughed because I was like, okay. The reality ended up being that the van that they were saying it was had nothing to do with it. But you never see that headline after it's been debunked. You only see the, oh no, white van. So it kind of cracks me up whenever I hear that, because even though, yeah, you should always be cautious of people around you, if you see a $150,000 Sprinter, they don't want your kids. They don't want to attack you. They are not worried about you at all. They are on a vacation somewhere enjoying themselves. So the perception that all white vans are bad, that's a pretty bad one in my opinion. And trust me, I know a lot of people in white vans, and they aren't the boogeyman. Now let's talk about the one that I've been seeing popping up on the internet a lot more lately. That van parents are bad parents because they're dragging their kids along. And the fact is, I think within any community you can have good and bad. However, I've met a lot of van parents and they're super responsible. But I've met a lot of nomadic parents in general that are probably better parents than some of the ones that live in regular homes. Now, I'm not saying you're better or worse, or your parenting style is better or worse, whether you're in a sticks and bricks or if you're in a vehicle. And I'm sure that there's challenges with both. I personally am not a parent, so I can't really speak on those particular things. But I think that grouping an entire group of people in general into one category is never a good look. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, these people are terrible because they drag their kids along, you should look at it from their perspective. Now, I have several followers here on the channel who travel in various kinds of RVs that follow my channel because of the educational content that I produce. And they take their kids along and they want their kids to experience things. And they make sure that their kids have a fulfilling life. Now, talking to them, because my mom is also a teacher, I've had some curiosities and I've asked some questions, which is what you should do before you judge people. What kind of questions have I asked? Well, I've asked them about how it works with like their social structure and being around other kids. And you might be surprised, there's actually some parent groups that kind of travel together so their kids can have people to socialize with, or they go to educational sites together, or they meet up with homeschooling groups in various areas and keep up with their friends via pen pal. I think that it's a really great and very interesting way to kind of approach things, especially in today's climate. And then as for the comparison of being in a vehicle versus being in a sticks and bricks, there's a lot of families who actually do tiny living who have not much more space than what some people have in a vehicle. Now, I will give a caveat that's just a personal thing that has nothing to do with anything though. I would probably recommend getting something a little bit larger than, you know, my van. But at the same time, your quality of life is impacted not just by the place that you stay the night in, but also the places that you go. So I personally think it's a great idea to get out and explore and teach your kids about the world around you. And so I'm never going to judge people for that. And maybe there should be a little bit less of a perception and more of an actual conversation. And then people would understand why nomadic families do exist and have for years and years and years. In fact, one of our really good friends, Tony, her parents actually used to travel in a school bus, and guess what? Now she's a whole adult and she is very well adjusted. So yeah, that's a pretty weird perception. In our next perception, let's talk about how people view people. It's pretty common for people to view you differently based on what it is that you do in your van. If you are traveling and going to a place and then just hanging out in that place, you are more than likely perceived to be a bum. It's just kind of how it is. But if for some reason you're traveling from place to place, you are perceived very differently. And if you are like myself and some of my friends where you have a camera in your hand, again, you are perceived differently. Let me explain. See, because of the very camera that I'm recording this video on, if somebody sees me out and about, they want to ask questions. They're curious. They want to see how it is that you sustain life on the road, and then they want to know what your channel is, and then they want to go and check it out because they're curious. And they're more likely to perceive you as an entrepreneur because you're doing something with your life. But for those people who literally do the exact same thing that I do and they just don't record it, they'll look on at them with a scowl. And I'm not going to say that I don't get a few scowls too, because, you know, it just is the nature of the beast. Some people are never going to get it. But I am less likely to get looked on with a scowl than someone who is just existing. Now, mind you, I find this super funny because some of these people are existing in literally homes on wheels that are worth more than most people's homes in towns. But at the same time, they look at them kind of weird because they're like, I don't understand, therefore it must be wrong, which is a horrible perception to have, but it is the reality. So a lot of people will think that you're just a bum or you're sponging off of the land or that they're paying for you to just freeload. And that's what they will literally tell you to your face. And it is not fun to have those conversations, but it is a conversation that so many people want to deep dive into. But for some reason, whenever you tell them that you have a YouTube channel, they suddenly get super excited and then they want to be your friend. That's so silly because, again, we're literally doing the same thing. But it is kind of what it is. This goes into my next perception, though, which is the hierarchy structure. Now, the hierarchy structure is a perception that doesn't just exist amongst people who don't do what we do. It also exists within our own community. That's right. We're going to talk about it. So what is the hierarchy structure and perception that happens? Well, sometimes if you have a big vehicle, a big A-class, you view yourself in one way, and then you view people who have tiny heinies like me over here as something lesser than. And if that's how you want to go about life, it's no different than regular people in everyday sticks and bricks. People with big houses tend to sometimes think that they are better than people in small houses. It's silly, but it's reality, and for some reason it's been like that since the beginning of time. Now, in all reality, that's not where the hierarchy stops, though. I covered this on a previous video. Elitism really does exist in the van community, or in the nomadic community in general. Bus people hang out with bus people. RV people tend to gravitate toward RV people. Van people tend to gravitate toward van people. But even within those particular rankings, certain people hang out with other people, but don't allow other people into the mix. And it becomes really high school and juvenile, and it's silly. And so I just try to get along with everybody. But at the same time, not everybody has that mentality. So if you meet somebody and they're rude to you in the community, just know that it's not you, it's literally them. But then that also blends over into the perception that people that don't have nomadic lifestyles kind of perceive, because they see that there's dissension amongst the ranks. And guess what? That causes all sorts of fun drama to be had. And it's just one of the realities. So it's one of these things that when you make choices in your life, whether it's in a big community, a cul-de-sac, a small suburban area, or a vehicle, you're gonna get basically the same thing, just coming at you from a different angle slightly. Let's start this one off with a peace sign, because everybody thinks that if you live in a van, you must be a hippie, or you have to be some version of granola. In fact, minimalism in way of being a vehicle dweller or some form of traveler, typically in the average mind, somehow magically becomes peace, love, and Grateful Dead. Literally, that is so much of what people think. And whenever they see that there are people from all walks of life who do this, their mind is just blown. Now, let me tell you some of the interesting people that I have met along the way. I have met musicians, which could fall under that. Okay. I have met literal office workers who can work remotely in insurance and in the medical field. I even met a literal NASA rocket scientist who lives in his van. So the concept that everyone is just a peace, love, joy kind of granola person isn't necessarily a correct perception. Now, of course, there are people who are very peace, love, joy, peace, love, hope, those kind of people. But also there's people who are out adventuring. There's people who are getting out there and they are doing amazing, crazy, adventure sports. There are people out there who are musicians who are traveling. There are people out there who are traveling nurses. There's a little bit of everything sprinkled into the nomadic community. But the perception is, if you live in a van, you must be a hippie. Okay, let's talk about the last one. The last one is that women versus men. It's the tale as old as time. People think that men should get out and do things and be active, but women should be more refined and not in vehicles. And because of that, a lot of different perceptions spring out. The first of which is kind of going back to the white van syndrome. A man in a van is looked at more poorly because he might be a creeper. But at the same time, he's more accepted in the adventure world because he's a man, so clearly this makes sense. So it's kind of weird that you get both sides of that coin. But as for women, we must be scared all the time, or we must be absolutely so brave because we're getting out there. Or we must be a person who just had to have some kind of problems because we have excommunicated society. There's no one thing that brings people to being a nomad. Again, I have met families, I have met people who are professionals, I have met people who just enjoy adventure. And I think that all sides of the coin are super valid. But unfortunately, when you meet people who don't understand that, their perception is their projection. And their projection is going to be whatever part that they don't get about what you do. So for example, I have met people who have outright said, "Who hurt you? Why did you do this? Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good. Thank you." I have also met people who found out about my YouTube and have been like, "Oh my gosh, that is awesome that you're doing all these things. That is so brave." It's just kind of funny. And the more I talk to more people, they all get some form of this perception, but most of them still always go back to men are more accepted in doing this than women. And so it's usually a projection of that. And so whenever you're getting ready to go out on the road, or if you're already out on the road, what have you seen, or what are you thinking you will see? Because, well, I've pretty much heard it all, but I'd love to hear your story too. Who knows? It might be different than mine. But, it's kind of interesting. And the more that we chat about these things, the more that those perceptions turn into things that we can communicate, so we can better assist those who perceive into those who actually know. Thanks again, guys, for coming along with me and talking about perceptions. It's kind of interesting to see how people view us as we're traveling around the world in our tiny vehicles or our bigger vehicles, or even in our weekend warrior rigs. Car camping, van life, RV life, bus life, we're all in the same boat together, because at the end of the day, we're living an unconventional lifestyle. So again, if you've had any weird perceptions thrust in your direction, leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear them. And for all of those who are new, welcome to the club. Remember, guys, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. And I hope that you have a good time down the road. Bye!